Okay, so we're here with Elena and we're going to do an experiment.
Yes, we are going to ask people what they know about the European initiatives on corporate sustainability. Let's see if people are willing to talk to us.
Can I sit with you? Okay. Sorry, you can finish your report.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, mister, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Where are you?
Ciao. Do you know that the European Union is currently working on an initiative to reduce corporate accountability for environmental and human rights impact?
What is your opinion about that? What do you feel?
They have to do more?
They have to do less.
Less? Oh, I think that's stupid. That's so dumb. I get it, but it means there's more to hide.
Mi si dice triste. Sad. It's a little bit sad.
I think all of this comes from not being able to see the bigger picture. Because there's no planet in the future, there's no business that can thrive.
Political parties are pushing either in one way or the other, and I think there shouldn't be even a discussion. Like, if the situation is very bad, we should fix it.
I would like to ask you a couple of questions, if that's okay.
What media?
You were afraid that it was a right-wing channel, right?
Yes.
Hello everybody and welcome to a new edition of the show. I'm gonna lower the music because it's probably gonna be too much. I'm here with Elena. How are you, Elena?
Hi everyone, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you for joining us in this nice adventure that we did. We took one of our weekends to just creep out on people and talk to them about the things that we research, and because we always talk about we should talk more to people about the things we do.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting me. It was so much fun to hang around with you and asking people questions about my research topic, actually. It's something that doesn't happen that much.
What was your main finding after doing all of this? Was there something that you believed beforehand? What were your fears? And then what did you find out?
No, I think I was impressed by the fact that I would assume that people knew less about this topic, and instead they kind of had an idea of what was going on. And at the same time, it challenged me how to find the right way to ask questions and to put people at ease, because many times people have an opinion. They just are too insecure to say it out loud, especially with experts. But in social research, it's very important, the interaction with people.
Totally. I think that our sample was also a bit biased because we got only pro-EU people. But
in technical jargon, this is called project limitations, right?
Exactly. We are also bringing up the scientific parts here, but we are going to show now a video of how we started to explain people what we were talking about, and join me.
And let's see.
Sustainability. Do you think about this topic sometimes in your life, in your daily job?
I do, very much. I think all young people think about this topic. It's very pressing for us. I think we grew up with it. It's a topic that I see that the EU promotes. So, for me, sustainability is really important. I think it should be for all of us, to be honest.
Do you know anything about the initiatives that the European Union is doing about sustainability?
Not specifically, but if you've got any information about them, I'd like to know.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to tell you the story of this recently adopted legislation, which is called Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which imposed to big companies to collect information about their negative impacts on the environment and human rights throughout their whole supply chain, which has been approved last year, and currently this year European institutions are in the process of reducing and watering down this law.
I had not heard about this. So it was an initiative that the EU is promoting, and then now the companies are trying to go against it?
Yes, sort of, but not only companies, also European institutions themselves are watering down and are taking steps back to reduce the obligations of companies.
Okay. Well, I guess I think all of this comes from not being able to see the bigger picture. There's no planet in the future. There's no business that can thrive.
I'm worried if we are going back because I really think we should go forward in terms of sustainability, and it's not all about money and profit. It's everyone's responsibility to be aware of what's going on. We are all actors and actresses of this world. I know it's sometimes we will all feel lazy to understand what's going on because people want to let us think that everything is complicated, but I think actually it's very simple. So
that was very interesting. So I have wait, I'm lowering the wrong volume. This is the correct one. I have a few observations already. So one thing is the first person you interviewed, Clara was her name, from Spain. And to me, what struck me is that she, by default, thinks that the EU is working on behalf of the citizens. She has a point, though, in the sense that the EU was one of the jurisdictions that made the most progress in their ESG regulations. And actually, I brought here some notes about the history of how this regulation came about. So we need to mention the EU Green Deal of 2020. This was approved also by President Ursula von der Leyen in her first mandate. But in the middle, what happened was elections. June 2024, right-wing backlash. And this means that for her to get a second mandate, she needed to agree with more right-wing people. So this new coalition is way more linked to the right. And also, another thing is, we can probably get more into the decision-making of the EU later, but there is one overarching thing of the EU right now, which is competitiveness, right? So there are a lot of concerns that we are lagging behind compared to the US. So this regulation apparently is supposed to tackle that problem, right? I think they went a bit too far, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for the European Union to stick to their intent, to its intention, and propose a different model than as comparing to what the US is adopting, because we are seeing that it's not bringing us forward anywhere. At the same time, I understand the objection that it's difficult for the European Union and for European companies to do something concrete if we are the only one doing that. And we definitely need broader support from the international community. At the same time, again, if no one starts, how can we get there?
No, absolutely. We need coordination here. We cannot do things alone. But we also cannot back down irresponsibly, because another point that was made in the video by another one of our interviewers was, actually, this is pretty easy to understand, right? Like the world is getting in a very big trouble. So before we start, because we also brought some comments about what the regulation actually says, but let's watch a bit more of the opinions of our interviewees, and then we comment on it.
Sadly, I heard about it, so I'm opposed. I think it's a political issue, and political parties are pushing either in one way or the other, and I think there shouldn't be even a discussion. Like, if the situation is very bad, we should fix it.
I think that is not correct because I see so many people work for a better world, and I think it's very important that all of us work for that. If I think about the bigger employers and the little one work for a better world, and the bigger no, is strange and a little bit come si dice triste? Sad. It's a little bit sad.
Okay, reactions.
Yeah, to me, one of the most striking points is that sustainability is perceived not only from the normal citizens, but also from policymakers as a political topic. Even if we are increasing scientific evidence that we could not keep going with this kind of with this model of doing business, and like perpetuating environmental degradation, fostering climate change, and growing social inequalities. This is something that is going against the common good. At the same time, probably defining what the common good is a very political issue. So sustainability is really a topic that put together the most recent scientific progresses and a political agreement on what is the best interest for the community. Is that really growth and competitiveness and essentially profit? Or is it something else that we need to prosper as a society?
Absolutely. And now that you mentioned this scientific, because I want to clarify that it's not that we are radicals, that we say, no, this regulation never needs to change, because everything that relates to climate and nature is, of course, also tied to scientific developments. So, of course, you need to update these rules. It's ridiculous to think that, oh, this is set in stone. But the thing is, this regulation, and we also need to say this, are being reformed after recently being approved with very little data. So this is not something that is being worked on behalf of the people. And another thing that I wanted to pick up, because it's true, the politicization of the agenda is not going to make climate change go away.
Absolutely
not because, oh yeah, right-wing won the elections, now they are right, climate change doesn't exist. That's independent of political wins. And the other thing is we interviewed a business owner in Florence, she was very kind to speak with us. And in her view, she said, guys, like we, little business, we do more about trying to be sustainable than big companies. But the argument of the Omnibus proposal is precisely the opposite. They are saying we are overburdening the little guys, and the big ones that can comply, well, they need to keep doing it in theory, but not really, right? Because I want to mention now the actual changes in the regulation. The first thing is that there's a delay in when the companies need to start complying with all of this. So they were supposed to already, most obligations kick in by 2025, they delayed things by 26 and beyond. So that's one big issue. And the other issue is that, especially with the regulation that is called Climate Sustainability Reporting Directive, because that is why it's called an omnibus package, because it reforms a lot of regulations. But when it comes to CSRD, they elevate the threshold of companies. Before it was 500, correct, yes, employees, and now it's companies that have over 1,000 employees. This is a bit too much, because according to the impact assessments of the Commission itself, this removes 80% of the companies of the reporting obligations. This is massive. Even the ECB made an opinion saying, guys, like, come on, this is too much. And then there's another proposal of giving simplified reporting standards to those little businesses. So, I think this is one of the most problematic areas of the regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And just seeing that the European Parliament has proposed to raise the threshold for this corporate sustainability reporting to 3,000 employees for companies that have more than 3,000 employees, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. And this also affects the other legislation that is concerned with this topic, which is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, mm-hmm, which actually imposed to big companies to identify, assess, and then mitigate or put an end to the negative impact to the environment and human rights found throughout their own supply chain. And the new omnibus package that is threatening to reduce the legislation that it was adopted last year in July 2024, mm-hmm, is also proposing to reduce the obligation of big companies to request information to these to their like business partners and smaller subsidiaries, mm-hmm, to the point that
only the direct business partner has to be due diligence.
Only the direct business partners that are upon the that meet the threshold for the reporting obligations. So here there is a combination of reporting obligations and obligation of actual conduct to like collect the information, because it makes no sense to have the obligation to report information if there's no also the obligation to collect this information, because companies can easily escape from this.
But I want to play devil's advocate a bit here, because I understand the companies that say, come on, man, you're asking me, my provider in Bangladesh, that I go to Bangladesh and do an audit. Like, what is enough audit? Like, should he send me a picture of the kids working in the factory that they are happy? Like, how do you know? So I understand that there is an overburdening there. And I also understand that there were very draconian measures once the companies identified a breach in human rights in their supply chain. For example, they were instructed, like, if you find somebody not complying with human rights, you should let go that provider. And then the EU companies would say, man, there's only one guy who does, I don't know, the part that goes into this computer or something. Then you really destroy the business. Now this changed with the regulation, so this is also a part that comes into the reasonable bit, I think.
Yeah, of course. At the same time, I've heard stories of like actual companies that to start to comply with this regulation basically went to China to check on the condition of the factories. Wow. And essentially they found a nice theatrical scene where the Chinese employees of their supplier pretended to be working in extremely good conditions, to be super happy, because also like it's a problem for them too if they don't want to be fired altogether or laid off because the European partner who until last year was providing their like wage to live, then all of a sudden
But this company then got to the bottom of the case, so they went to China and they found out, hey,
this was the intention of the directive, which I also support. I think we most of the time big companies don't even care. They just don't have the information on how things go in their throughout their supply chain. And I think it's important to be aware. And then maybe the measure that should be taken can vary. We can find a compromise on that. Also, not to adopt a colonialist approach to sustainability, which is also another topic that was raised by some of our interviews. But at the same time, I personally think that be aware is the first step to start to change
Totally.
the model.
I just think that sometimes we, from the academic point of view, probably we are too ambitious, and I don't know, maybe we should bring a business person next time we do an episode. But the only thing I mention is I understand this limitation. The one that I don't understand and that I'm very much against, and this is probably, let me tell you, the regulation has so many parts, so we are commenting on a tiny subset of the many things that are changing, but a big one is the civil liabilities regime.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is crazy. You agree, right? That
Absolutely.
is crazy.
This was originally even sharper during the first...
But let me explain what it is first.
Of course.
So before there was a minimum threshold of the fines, which was 5% of the total turnover. So that's the profit of the company of the whole world. So that was also massive. Like that level of liability was huge. I also... But
5% for, I don't know, Apple. And they grab the resources that many of us do not have.
But probably, it's true. But okay, fair point. You win in that one. But the one that is, by all means, scandalous is not allowing people to be represented by NGOs and unions in court.
Yeah.
Because an individual doesn't have the resources to go to court and face such a huge legal challenge like this one.
Absolutely. And case law tells us that NGOs have been in the first line to raise company sustainability, and they fought a lot to raise the bar of big companies' liabilities for environmental degradation, climate change, and social inequality. And so taking this option away is really detrimental for the interest of the damaged parties. And I was mentioning that in the first draft of the European Commission proposal, there was even like a provision saying that directors of biggest companies must be responsible to manage the company, taking into account not only the company's interest but also sustainability. And of course, it's a very vague word that again entail like an agreement on what the common good and the common objective for our like society to prosper it means. But this text was very, very ambitious, maybe too much ambitious. That's why now it's
getting backlash.
Complete rejection. But there was really, truly like an idealistic, a positive idealistic, I would say, effort in all this. And now we are really, really going back. And this is also, as you were mentioning before, an effect of the change of the parliamentary majority in the European Parliament. And this would also urge all of us to actually go and vote.
Send an email to your parliamentary. Use your email inbox. Tell to your EU.
Vote when there are elections.
Yes, that too. But there is also this argument about what the market can do for sustainability, right? And this is part of the next interview that we are going to listen. We have another one first, because this is a surprising thing that we found when we interviewed a girl from Argentina, from my home country, and this is what she said to us when we asked her about what she thinks about this topic of sustainability.
I don't know if... I think that there are many things to take care of, like people sleeping in the street, poverty and many things. Of course, that the earth needs our concern and needs our conscience about what's not to do. And I think that little things can make the change. I don't know if it's a priority right now, because I think many things are going on in the world, but I think you have to take notes, for the future. Yeah.
So, we have a lot to say about this, right? And I brought something of evidence because the European Investment Bank just released a report measuring precisely this, and you will see that here they show that physical and transition risk by country, actually it affects way more poor countries. So you see Central America is quite small here, but it has really a lot of impact. And then you have Africa being severely hit, Greenland, which is also part of Donald Trump's ambitions, and, all of the global south. While the transition risks, on the contrary, affect way more the developed world, or even some countries that have a lot of oil. And maybe it is worth pausing and making a bit this distinction between physical and transition risk.
Risk related to climate change, right?
Exactly. So what this graph shows is that climate change in action actually affects more those third world countries. Because when you go to Argentina or you go to other places, you're like, man, we don't have time to do this crap. But this graph shows that first, climate change affects more the poor, and that the transition risk, risk is called to what happens to the economy when you start making companies divest in those gray assets. For example, a pension fund that has a lot invested in certain areas of the economy, suddenly they are having their assets impact by the regulation, portfolios drops, so it can create effects on financial stability. And you see that the countries that are affected the most by the physical risk are not necessarily the ones that also are affected by the transition risk. And that means that countries affected by the transition risk will not like the transition to happen so quickly, because they will lose money, basically. Yeah. Or they are subjected now to other type of risks related to the stability of the financial system. So the incentives are misaligned. Also because the countries that contribute the most to climate change are not the ones that are mostly affected. But if their change is made, they are going to be the ones mostly affected.
Absolutely. There's a lot of conflict of interest because sustainability has inevitably become part of our sensitiveness, also for people in business. But at the same time, they raise the right question, which is how far does the private sector have to go to protect the public interest? But in the current legal environment, most obligations are towards shareholders.
Shareholders, totally, yeah.
And big investors and companies, whereas the negative effects on people are not taken into account in the regulation. And this is why it's very important to preserve some positive principles that this innovative, weird, maybe inefficient regulation somehow has brought in the discussion and in the European law system.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. So let's now touch base on this idea of climate regulations make business expensive, because I guess that this is the main point, and we touched it in another one of our interviews.
One of the main reasons for this step back is the idea that since we live in an interconnected economic system, if only European businesses start to adopt these good practices, this would not change anything, because there would be more opportunities for other business in other countries to do what European companies cannot do anymore. And so they say that it cannot be only Europe to move forward on this, but we should have a collective effort. And since this collective effort is not possible, then this would only be detrimental for the European economy.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, unfortunately, it does. There's just so much. I mean, as you said, it is such a globalized and interconnected system that it's hard for just one actor to stand up and say, okay, we have to change things. If it especially doesn't have like the power that the European Union thinks it has, because at the end of the day, unfortunately, it just isn't as much as it wants to believe it is. So maybe, I don't know, sustainability will come naturally if we adopt a more positivist sort of approach. I mean, nuclear fusion is on the rise, and it looks like maybe in the next 10, 20 years we'll have free energy around the world. So maybe, I don't know.
So you would say leave it to the market to decide?
I mean, no, definitely not, because, I mean, even if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy fruit and vegetables that come from the local territory, it costs more than if you're buying fruit that comes from Ecuador. So you can't leave it to the market, because the consumer will always go for the cheaper option unless they have the economic power to choose otherwise.
Okay, leave it to the markets.
Yeah, that was a little bit provocative for me, but this is the dilemma, and this is why it's really important to continue the conversation and to have these principles embedded in corporate governance and corporate law regulation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is a bit technical, but to me, it's really important also to overcome the political volatility of sustainability as a point on the agenda.
Absolutely. And I think that, for example, one thing that we also a bit overlook here, or what's this? The rapporteurs. Today, I think we both got angry in LinkedIn because we saw this post, and it's a bit, he says, my report on the Omnibus package is now available, says the rapporteur, and he looks very tough and macho. Mm-hmm. And this is the new development, because this guy, he's supposed to be talking with all the stakeholders involved in this regulation and coming with a position that represents the parliament. This guy is from the majority party of the EU, which is not like the national parties that, for example, each national party goes by themselves, they're in the EU parliament and do whatever. They kind of associate into larger groups, And this guy represents the majority party, which is even way more radical, his proposal, than the original Omnibus. So these things that we were all commenting, they can even get worse. For example, they increase the threshold for reports from 1,000 employees to 3,000 employees. So that is going to be massive. Mm-hmm. And now the big question is like...
And the transition plans.
And the transition plans are going to be removed, which what this means is that there's going to be less data for, as you mentioned, companies. I'm more biased because I normally look at the bank side, but also banks that want to verify their portfolios are going to have a very big, hard time to do their job. At some point, the climate change creates so much chaos that it can totally destabilize the economy.
Yeah,
so
it's still doing it. We can see fires, floods, incredibly high heats. And this is why I found it crazy, especially in the proposal to delete the obligation for companies to adopt and implement a climate transition plan, which is, again, it's a controversial legislative obligation because it brings into the law, into the corporate law and corporate governance, attention to values that might also, for some companies, go beyond their short-term interests, because climate change, for some companies, depending on the business, can have impacts right now. For others, might have negative impacts in 50 years. So it is controversial, but it is extremely important. And it was also like a little... element of innovation that was preserved, and I'm astonished that the European Parliament, which was originally the most progressive forces behind this regulation, now after the European election is completely on the opposite side and bringing forward like this insane proposal, because this doesn't have any economic and social sense, like any sense at all.
It doesn't have any sense. So I hope we did a good job.
I think so. Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for this moment of reflection that we do on a Sunday. That's what we do on a Sunday. The nerdy people sit down and talk about regulation and law.
Sometimes, but not always.
Okay. See you next time. Thank you for tuning in.